Welcome to the Generation to Revelation podcast.
A boomer,
a Gen Xer,
and a millennial walk into a church to discuss relevant faith topics for today. Welcome to the second season of the Generation to Revelation podcast.
Yay!
I am Pastor Michaela Eskew, Associate Pastor of Faith Formation here at First Lutheran Church in Colorado Springs.
I'm Lori Duncan, and my title here is Minister of Spiritual Care.
And I'm Pastor Travis Norton. I'm the Senior Pastor here at First Lutheran Church.
All right, our first topic for the whole season is, why should we believe? It feels like there's a real risk out there to believing and becoming a Christian and being associated with the Christian church. But obviously, we're three believers, and we think it's worth it.
Yeah, fully committed follower. Well, as fully committed as I don't know if I can say I'm fully committed. I want to be a fully committed follower of Jesus. I'm always trying to get better and more committed, but I'm in. Like I'm a Christian and proud of my faith, but I also am pretty sympathetic to people who are reluctant to claim that title, because I think Christianity comes with a lot of baggage. It's been around for 2,000 years and has a track record through history, and some of it's good and some of it's not good. And even in our current age, not all churches are the same, not all Christians are the same, and it's usually the mistakes that we make or the poor representatives of Christ that get the public press. And so if I'm looking at that and I'm not a Christian yet, even if I believe in Jesus, I might be a little hesitant to say I'm ready to be a Christian, because I don't want to be associated with all of that. Mm-hmm. And even for me, like, as a Christian, as a pastor, as a follower of Jesus, like I still struggle with all of the associations that means. Like that means I'm a brother to lots of different kinds of Christians, and Christians who say things I don't agree with, Christians who say things that I think misrepresent Christ, Christians who do things that are opposed to what I think Jesus teaches, what I think the gospel is. But they're still my family, and I think that's some of the reluctance out there as why people are hesitant to claim the Christian faith, even if they find Jesus compelling, even if they find the gospel compelling. But I still believe.
All of those things that Pastor Travis said, I would go to the compelling nature of Jesus. I met someone. I met a person. I met Jesus, and I can't unmeet him. Mm-hmm. And I can't act or live like I haven't met him and like he hasn't touched my life and changed it. And so all the other stuff that comes along with the messiness of humanity and the messiness of trying to live out faith where we all land on different interpretations of different things, that comes along with knowing that person. And so it's all worth it to me to sit in the mess with my brothers and sisters and work toward a more healthy expression.
Yeah. This topic comes out of the rise of spiritual but not religious, and those that on a random survey say, what religion are you part of? What would you claim? And they say none. But more data realizes that they actually do believe in something. They just don't want to claim anything. And I can even claim that during my young adulthood, I claimed to be spiritual but not religious for these very things that we just mentioned, that the institution seemed like a whole mess that I did not want to be a part of, but I knew that I had a connection with God. And probably if I had been given that survey, I would have said Lutheran, because that's what I was raised in, and that's the church that I went to every Sunday, thanks to my father. But what about those people that didn't grow up with that? And they feel the kind of ambiguous spirituality in the world. They can witness creation and see a creator. They can witness people doing kind things that just make no sense, and you can possibly claim a Christian attitude, a Christian way of living. But how do you talk to someone who never grew up in the faith? Lori, you didn't grow up in the faith. You came to it later in life. I
did come to it later, but I also had been taken to Sunday school as a child.
Okay.
So I was exposed to Christianity, and before I had, a born-again type experience, which is how I would describe it, if you had told me that I didn't believe and that I was not a Christian, I would have sworn at you and said, who are you to tell me
Right.
that I don't have a good relationship with God. And so I was exposed to faith. I can't say I didn't have any exposure to it at all.
Right. Well, and we're pastors. We see the pews fill up on Christmas and Easter. So we do know that there's some exposure for some people, but it sometimes is only Christmas and Easter. And is that enough to really convict someone to full belief?
Well, I think kind of what Lori was saying, that in the end, it's up to God. Like, God's the one who encounters people and meets people, and that's my experience too. Is I've had a personal experience with God, many of them, and so like I know that God's real. I know that God has encountered me in my life. I've had spiritual experiences, and then it's, what do you do with that? You know, how do you make sense of that? And the scriptures and the gospel and the story of Jesus is the best picture I have of pointing to this God that I've met in my own life. And so my commitment to Jesus comes from those experiences and then is nurtured by the church and the institution of the church. And so if I'm talking to somebody who is not a Christian, I don't think anybody's really starting from like a blank slate, because I think people have had experiences with God and have had spiritual experiences, or at least have had prayers, and they might not call them prayers, but they would say, these are, what's the purpose of my life? Why have these things happened? And, who are you asking those questions to? And we think that there is a God who is receiving those prayers and answering them and giving people meaning. And but it seems to me that it comes down to God's job to encounter people and people to respond to that one way or the other. And then the church's job is to kind of help make sense of those experiences people already have.
Mm-hmm. Or I would say the church's job too is, in some ways, I think, to help create the possibility for those experiences. I mean, God is always the one who's going to do it. But I would say I have met people that really wanted an encounter with the divine and never had it. And I would say maybe that it's not that they didn't have it, they just didn't know how to recognize it
Right.
or what to do with it. But that idea of bumping up against the transcendent, maybe if we could, as an entry point, even frame it in that language. Have you ever gone outside and looked at the starry night and just thought, this is spectacular? Mm-hmm. That's a transcendent moment. And I don't know, the spiritual but not religious, I do have sympathy for that, but part of me looks at it and says, that's God at work.
Yeah,
That's God at work.
Right, that's why there is that category, right?
Right.
Is that people have had spiritual experiences, and then they're asking the question, why does the church matter? Why can't I just have these experiences outside of the church? So they're kind of two different questions. There's why believe in God, period, and then it goes a little deeper, why believe in the Christian God and Jesus and the cross and resurrection. And then there's a separate question of why be part of a church community that believes these things together. Why not just do it by myself in the woods? We always say that. I don't know if people actually
I think because the idea is like, it's always the easiest to find the creator God. And so I go for a hike. Like, that's how I find God, is when I go out into the woods for a hike or camping or things like that. That's how I connect to my God.
Yeah. And I wouldn't dismiss that. I mean, those have
Absolutely.
been powerful experiences for me. I remember when I was a young adult in college, spring break, going to southern Utah, going backpacking in Canyonlands, and you'd sit on a cliff and watch the sunset, and you'd not see people for miles and miles, and you see this vast horizon, and then the sky darkens and the stars come out, and you sleep under the stars, and it's just this enormous universe. And there's something about that fills your soul. It's just the beauty of it, the vastness of it, the smallness of you. There's a connection, and you recognize that this isn't like an evolutionary response to anything, right? Like this is a spiritual experience that I'm having, and God is the name for that, right? And so I think people had those experiences and return to them. I think there's more. I think that's an entry point, right? That spiritual, not religious, is an entry point into a fuller faith, a faith that is a community faith, a faith that has a project in the world that God's trying to do that you can become a part of. But so I would never dismiss someone who's spiritual, not religious. I say, well, everybody starts there, I think, and then where does that go? I don't think it's super sustaining to stay there. And I hate to be judgmental about it, but there is a shallowness to it, where it's just a personal feeling of spiritual fullness, but how does it change how you treat those around you?
Right.
And does it give purpose to your life? Do you have a sense of something that God who met you at the sunset or overlooking the ocean is doing something good in the world and inviting you to be part of that?
Right.
Are you ready to take that next step and be part of, and to at least discover or ask those questions? What are you doing, God, and how can I be part of it? Or is it just a feeling that I get to have that makes me feel good for a moment and feel part of something bigger than myself? And is that all that it is,
Yeah.
spiritual but not religious, or is there more to it?
Right. I've been working with a local college here to talk with young adults, and it does feel like as I'm in front of them, they're all spiritual but not religious. They would claim that openly. I would say some of them I could even label as spiritual seekers. They're people that are intrigued by it, but I think they're scared of what I'm going to call accountability of religion. Of oh, well, now I have to abide by these rules that Jesus laid out, to turn the other cheek, to forgive 70 times 7, to be a part of justice work in the world. Now, most young adults are pretty good with the justice work, and they're actually pretty fine with Jesus, the social worker. I think what scares them is the Son of God piece, the divine piece that's really risky to believe in. There's plenty of things to get into further podcasts about, what's the risk of believing certain things in our faith. But I think just being in front of them, talking to them about my faith, the way that it has transformed me, I think it's the transformation and the accountability that's a little scary. It's a lot easier to just be spiritual and just connect to God when I want to connect to God. Because if you're willing to pray for things to change, that might also mean that you're changed. And that's terrifying because you want to be the controller of your own life and your own destiny. And God might have a different plan. I can attest to that I had a very different plan for my life, and yet I'm here as a pastor of a Lutheran church in Colorado Springs. Never would have told myself that as a teenager in California.
I think you're right. I think that accountability piece is really hard. Pastor Michaela, you and I were just at a advocacy meeting, and I felt that same kind of pressure. Do I want to, if I say yes to this, or this action in the world, justice action, what else comes with that? What's am I now all of a sudden part of a political party that people are going to put all these labels on me and that I don't want? And so it's easy to just push that all away and say, I'm for good in the world, but I'm not going to do anything specific or concrete or commit myself to any particular group of people, because that comes with all sorts of other things that I'm not in control of, right? And it is that invitation to submit and to let other people be in charge and other people have influence on you, and be part of a community that has a shape that's bigger than just you. And so it's not just your own individual curated personality that you're putting out in the world, right? Now you're part of a collective, and there may be parts that you agree with or don't agree with, but so I think that accountability piece, I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but there is something about that pressure and that being part of something bigger than yourself that comes with, it just changes how you're perceived and you're no longer in control of it. And we live in this internet world where I control what I look like to the public, and what I put on my social media posts and how I, curate the images that are public out there. And as soon as you submit to Christianity, this institution, or go beyond that, just submit to a God who has final say over your life, then you are giving up a lot of that personal curation in the world, because now someone else is going to tell you what's right and wrong and what action you should take. And I think a lot of people, that feels like a pressure that they want to resist as long as possible. And I'm sympathetic to it. I still think it's worth it to dive in and trust. Maybe that's the part of it too, is that trusting God with your life rather than owning it just yourself.
I wonder how much generationally, things come into play, because we live in such a consumerist environment where everything is about me and meeting my needs and focused on what I want. So it's the same thing that y'all are saying, but I don't know if that's always been the case generationally. I mean, I think people lived with an expectation that living in this world will cost me something. I will be expected to serve my neighbor. I will be expected to give my life for something more than beyond myself, more than just myself. And I don't know that younger generations have that same framework. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm looking at the way things have changed. So I don't know, but there's that self-orientation that seems different than it used to be way back in the day, even before my day.
I watch a lot of TV, way more than I should, and I like Taylor Sheridan's TV shows, like Yellowstone is one of them. But as I was watching him, you just notice there's a worldview that is in each of his television series, and it's about, one person who can't trust any institutions, who has to be, his circle of trust is very small, and his responsibilities are very small to his land, to his family, to himself, his own honor, that kind of stuff. And it's this worldview that's consistent through all the TV shows. And so I was thinking about that, and I was working with AI, and I asked AI, tell me what the worldview of Taylor Sheridan's TV series are, and then compare them to, and I was trying to think of a movie that had a very similar one person trying to make sense of their life, but had a very different worldview. And so I said, compare it to like the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And the worldview was completely different, because now all of a sudden in It's a Wonderful Life, it's still like the world's hard, and there's all sorts of things that come against you, but institutions can be helpful, and working together and collaboration is a way to make it through, that we make it through together. And I don't know, Lori, if that resonates with the generational difference you're talking about, but there is something to that, where this generation, at least some of it, the worldview that's being presented is it's you against everybody else, and you can't trust anybody, and all institutions, all authorities, they're all flawed and dangerous, and you should be very suspicious of them. And that wasn't the case 25, 50 years ago, where it's sure there's bad people in the world, but if we come together, if we work together and work through our institutions, we can make a difference in the world. We can do good together. They can create cultures that are helpful to society. And so we are willing to subsume ourselves into that, to be part of something bigger than ourselves, to be part of an institution, to do that work, rather than always be suspicious. So if you're, a young adult with a worldview that all authority is to be is suspect, is dangerous, and someone says, why don't you become a Christian?
Yeah.
You're like, that's a big authority. Why don't you submit to God? Like, I'm not submitting to anybody, because all I've seen is authorities betray or fail or let down, institutions that have ulterior motives that aren't interested in me. Like, why would I ever trust any of that? Yeah. And Christianity has a track record where there's some really good things, but there's some bad things too. And so
we're going to do a whole podcast on that, don't we?
Right? So it's just, it's all the same. I'm very sympathetic to the resistance to it. But that's not the question. Like, I'm in, right? Like,
You're all in.
I'm all in for Christianity, and I want to be part of making the religion, I'm spiritual and religious, that I think the religion, the institution of the church, can help people live better lives, live more just lives, make a difference in the community they're in, make the world more like God wants it to be. It's not something I can do alone. It's something I need a group of people who are committed to God's vision of the world to be marching towards together. And I need people in my life who are corrective of me, because I don't have a perfect view of myself, and I don't see where I'm at fault, and I need people to say, hey, you need to be corrected here. I think this would be more in line with who God is, who we understand God to be together. So I need brothers and sisters to come alongside me and hold me accountable. And that's super uncomfortable. Like, it's much easier to be spiritual but not religious, to be on my own, to be accountable to no one, to just seek those good feelings and some kind of connection to the universe without any responsibility to anybody else or without anybody impinging upon my autonomy and my freedom, right?
I think trust is a big word in all of this, because if anyone's been on a really great team, like, you know what it's like to just like trust the people that you're with on your team and to like make towards the goal, whether you were on a sports team or you made a play happen or whatever it might be. Like, you have to trust people though. And if you did not grow up in the faith, or you only, had little stories here and there, or maybe you did go to Sunday school and all you heard is Old Testament stories, God forbid, like, the God that you hear of is not trustworthy. Like, why would I trust them? And especially not to be the judge of me, because that is one of the first things you hear, is that God is going to judge you. And so, if you believe in a God, though, that is a God of love and a God of mercy and forgiveness, and that's the God that you were taught as a kid, then that judge doesn't seem as scary. But I think it is trust, and trust of your fellow church members. Are they going to... is the council not going to steal money? Is is my fellow church member not going to say an awful thing to me? And I'm like, I can't believe you just said that at church.
Is the pastor going to live out the faith they preach from the pulpit, or are you going to have some scandal on the news, that's going to be like, make you question everything they ever told you?
Right.
That's never happened. Not once. Oops.
Not like we had an entire podcast episode about it last season. Right. But I think trust is the hardest part, and we're a very distrustful society right now. I don't think it has anything to do with generations. I think across the generations, we are distrustful of one another right now, and it is hard to be vulnerable, because to trust someone is to make yourself vulnerable to hurt and pain from the other person, from the other side.
Which is the gospel, right? That God knows this.
Yes.
And so God goes first, trusts us completely. I mean, that's the incarnation, becomes a child, entrusts his whole life to somebody else taking care of him, raising him, and then Jesus throws himself into society and throws himself at the mercy of religion and government, and goes to the cross, allows himself, talk about a picture of vulnerability, is Jesus on a cross, nailed to the cross, unable to help himself, and just has to submit to death itself. But that is that invitation out to all of us to saying, I will trust you first. I will be vulnerable first. I will give myself completely to you first. And in hopes that you would give yourself to me in as complete a way as I have given myself to you, right? That's Jesus saying, I will trust you first. And that's what I teach anybody in conversation. Like, we're talking about leaders trying to lead a small group, or you're talking about marriages and how to have good communication, that if you want someone to trust you, you have to trust them first. That's actually the key to opening up someone's trust in you, is you trusting them first, or asking for help first. And Jesus, God in Jesus does all of that let me show you my cards that I'm trustworthy by giving myself completely to you, in hopes that we would follow suit.
Yes, and Jesus, I don't think, was surprised when he was betrayed, right? And so he gave himself anyway. Yeah. So that's the ask. That's the ask that I think people push back on. If trust is the bottom line issue, do I want to say yes to a God who himself was killed, exposing me to the risk of losing my life that way? Is it worth it?
We're willing to die to self.
Right, what is it Bonhoeffer said, when Christ bids a man, he bids him come and die?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't help but think about Bonhoeffer during this whole thing, because it's, even if we can talk about spiritual but not religious, I opened with that, but I also want to turn it to, if we have people that are regularly going to church, but they're just going through the motions. Like, there is something for cheap grace versus costly grace. And to really offer your whole life to Jesus and to die to oneself means to make yourself very vulnerable. But the alternative is a cheap grace that just doesn't feed me. And so when I read Bonhoeffer and heard about cheap grace versus costly grace, cheap grace meaning I can go and sin whatever I want to. I'll get forgiven. God's a God of love. Like, right? I can essentially do anything I want and God will still absolutely give me grace. And so, but it's cheap. It's cheap grace versus costly grace is like, I'm going to be transformed. And by me being transformed and letting God work in and with and through me, I might actually change the world too.
And I think people know that. We all know that in every other aspect of life, that if you phone it in, it doesn't work, right? If I go to the gym and I never lift beyond what I came in able to lift, or never push myself, like, I'm not going to see any results. If you're on I used to play football, well, kind of, in high school.
Kind of.
Well, I practiced for the summer and then I quit. But I remember, like, in the practice sessions, like, I stood in the back behind everybody. I didn't volunteer to go in or to try anything. And as a result, I didn't get better, and I didn't get to play on the team, and I didn't get to experience the fullness of that because I was phoning it in. I thought being a football player meant you had a uniform on, right? It didn't, but that's not what anything means. Like, at some point in your life, I think that's the invitation to everybody at all times is, what are you committed to? Are you committed to anything? And if so, what is it? And commitment means being willing to let it change you and make you uncomfortable, transform your life. And if you do that in any aspect, then you actually get to see the results and the difference. And I would say doing that with God and Christianity and following Jesus, then you get to be part of God's project to save this world, to free it from sin, death, and the devil, and to be part of that project, and to receive that for yourself. But there is an invitation to go all in. But again, that invitation comes after Jesus has done it first for us.
Yeah, I think it's a risk. Christianity is a risk, and it's a hard one. And I think in the modern age, it's not a risk that many people need to do.
Well, right. I mean, there's the story of the rich man, right? The rich young ruler comes to Jesus and says, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says, "Well, keep the commandments." And he says, "I've kept all of them since my youth." And then Jesus says, "One thing you lack, go and sell your possessions, give the money to the poor, and come follow me." And the rich man was unwilling to do that. He says he hung his head, walked away because he had so many possessions. And then Jesus says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. But the thing is, we're all rich men. We're all rich men and women, especially in North America. We don't need to make these sacrifices, right? We can live a pretty easy life, pretty carefree life without making any kind of commitment. And so a lot of people just stay on the sidelines and never fully commit. And then I think you miss out on what God is doing in the world. But the other part of that is your life won't be carefree. Tragedy will come.
Yes.
And when it does, you will see God's grace there.
Yeah.
I think that is the gospel, is that whether we're on the sidelines or fully in, God is still coming for us, right? Because he still wants us and he loves us and he wants to show us who he is and invite us into his life that is eternal and life-giving and fuller than anything we'll experience apart from him. And so when that tragedy comes, when that sickness comes, when that loss comes, like our Lutheran theology says, you will find God there. Yeah. That God is always in the darkest places, in the loneliest places, in the most painful places. And the cross is the symbol of that. And once you know that about God, I mean, for me, I want to be part of that in other people's lives. Like, I want to go to the dark places with people and be an instrument of God in society at large, in individual lives, to bring that light and gospel.
And back to that story about the rich young ruler, it does say at one point in that story that Jesus looked at him and loved him. And I think that we sometimes separate, okay, cheap grace, costly grace. It's only those two choices. It's either I'm going to take the grace of God for granted and go live a sinful life, or I'm going to strive and work really hard to be the best person I can possibly be. And I'm sorry, I will always frame everything in intimacy with Jesus, because in any relationship of love, I want to be close to the person that I love. And Jesus is not out living a sinful lifestyle. So if I am spending my time developing closeness with Jesus, I'm not going to be interested in a sinful lifestyle. And so that, to me, it frames it differently. It's not like God is external to me watching which choice I make. Am I going to go off in sin, or am I going to try really hard? I mean, I do think that God, I want to be careful how I frame it, not either or. That's actually what I'm trying to get away from. But this idea of, I love a person. I love a person. And that person is not found off doing icky things. Does that make sense? Am I making
Yes,
sense? Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the difference between just, I believe in God, and like, I'm in a personal relationship with God. Like, I have attempted to trust and believe so much in this entity that I'm going to actually pour into this relationship like I would pour into a relationship out in the world. And so why it feels different to be transformed is the difference between, yeah, sure, I believe, to, oh no, I actually believe, and I'm actually going to pray because I actually think prayer will be responded to, and I will actually go to church and be around messy people and messed up people, and I'm going to love them, and I'm going to, practice every single Sunday being a Christian, because it's not easy. And then I'm going to go out on Monday morning, and I'm going to try to remember what my pastor said in their sermon or their message, and I'm going to try to live that out a little bit, or maybe I'm going to pick up my scriptures and be challenged by those. Like, there's a difference.
And I think we talked about trust as kind of one of the big roadblocks, because people have a hard time trusting anybody these days. But the thing that allows you to trust somebody is if you know they love you.
Yeah.
Right? Love opens up trust. And
absolutely.
when you encounter God and you recognize the depth of God's love, and then, I mean, part of Christianity and being a follower of Jesus is really just rediscovering the next layer of depth to God's love. Like, oh, you love me even now. Oh, you love me like this. Oh, and then the more I understand that God loves me, then the more I'm willing to trust him to change me, to change my behaviors. I think that's, my habits. But I think that's just the kind of the first part, right? Like the idea of sin and not sin and all that, like that's just like the surface. The next level is, your vocation and your purpose in life, and, how you're relating to the world, and going to God in prayer and saying, God, I know you love me. I know you not only love me, but you love my neighbor, and you love this world. And I know you are doing your work in the world out of love to bring it to an end that you have in mind, that we might call heaven or eternal life or the kingdom of God. And then you submit yourself to that work, right? And say, how can I be part of that work in how I relate to my family, how I relate to my job, how I relate to my community, how I relate to my neighbor? Like, what works do you want me to do? And then you're in, right? Like, you've gone down the road. You've taken the next step to more fully trust him. That's why I started as, am I a fully committed follower? I don't know. I'm a more committed than I was yesterday follower of Jesus, right? And in the church, there's a word for this. It's sanctification, right? It's becoming holy. It's becoming more like God in the world. But it is that invitation, thinking of that person who says, I don't want to commit, or I don't want to trust God. It's that invitation to give yourself over to somebody who is doing a loving work in the world, and trusting it more and more with your life so you can be more fully part of that work. That accepts you first. I think that we all start there with what we need. We need to be accepted and loved, so that we feel safe. And then we can take risks if we know that the God of the universe has our back and loves us, isn't going to use us as a pawn, isn't going to betray us, isn't going to abandon us when we need him the most.
Right. I do fully believe in sanctification. The more like 80-year-olds that I talk to at my congregation, the more I'm like, wow, faith gets easier, it seems, by the time you're in your later years. And then I was reading Madeline L'Engle in one of her devotional writings, and she was just like, oh yeah, the things that I believe now, I would never have believed in my young adulthood. And I'm like, okay, good. I'm in my mid 30s, but like when I get skeptical or I doubt, I'm like, oh man, like I should not do that. I should be fully committed. And then I'm like, no, God's going to work on me. Don't worry. I'll get to 80 and I'll be fully in.
Well, and the other part of that, what you just said, is if you're not in the church, how many 80-year-olds are you hanging out with?
Very true. Very
Right?
true.
Like there is, I think that's a gift of the church that we shouldn't minimize, is that like I am around older people, like I'm 49. I'm around people who are maybe not twice my age. I can't say that anymore, right? But I am, well, that too. But I'm around 80-year-olds and people who are thinking about death and have finished with their careers. And I'm around death a lot. And I'm at funerals a lot. And I'm having those kinds of conversations a lot. And that radically shapes my faith and my understanding of who
Yeah.
God is. And all those people like feed into me, and I get to learn from their example. And hopefully I'm doing the same for people younger than me and my peers, and even people older than me. But I don't know where that happens outside of the church, the institution of the church, the Sunday morning gathering of these people from all different walks of life and generations. I think, when it's working its best, that's what the church looks like. And it's such a beautiful gift. It's messy and hard, and, there are weird things that people of different ages do, and you just have to deal with that.
Yeah. A children's sermon always goes wrong. Always. It goes down a rabbit hole that you never predict.
But I think God gives us the gift of each other, and when there's institutions that bring people together for holy reasons, for loving reasons, and it's a beautiful thing. I think it's more beautiful than a sunset or than looking out over the ocean. I mean, that, like when I see Pastor Michaela, you do this a lot in pairing mentors, adults with children who are in confirmation, which is when they're becoming disciples of Jesus and learning how to be the faith. Like when I see a conversation between these two strangers of different generations talking to Jesus about each other and caring for each other and helping one another, like that's something beautiful that fills my soul much more than a sunset. And I love sunsets. Right?
Yeah.
Well, the Christian life is a journey.
Absolutely.
Right? So we're all on that journey, and it helps to walk together. It just helps to walk together. Some of us do, being alone better than others, but all of us somewhere are created for relationship. And the idea of seeing someone ahead of us on the journey and being able to say, hey, I can get through this too, and having that encouragement come back, and then we extend it to the people coming behind us. All of that matters. And then the developmental piece too, right? People older in life realize, I sweated some small stuff that maybe I don't need to now. And just learning together and being together. I think community can happen outside of the church, but the beauty of having a common relationship that binds us together makes it family more than community. At least that's the ideal, right? And we're all journeying toward that ideal. That is the hope. But again, we're back to messy. We do it messy.
Yeah.
But we do it together.
And I think there's an ache in people that they want that. Like when they want family that's bigger than just their blood relatives, right? They want to be part of community. They want to learn from men.
I'm a millennial. Where's my village? Where's my parenting
Right,
village?
right.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
want a village. I want mentors.
Yep.
And the church offers that. And the church is, we've kind of got our North Star of Jesus and his teachings that we gather around on Sunday, and we're aiming for that. And so certainly I never want to lift the church as this perfect entity, but we're on the way together. We're on a journey together as the church. But as we travel, you have these people that understand what their purpose is too, as part of God's family and the responsibility they have for one another. I mean, there's so many beautiful things that happen in the church. We have what we call Christian caregivers, which are just volunteers from the church who volunteer to take Holy Communion to those who can't physically get to church, right? And so I like this image of 10 people on a Sunday going out to sit in homes and nursing homes and hospital rooms, bringing the elements of bread and wine of Jesus that we gathered around as a community earlier that day, so that they can be included too. I mean, just that beauty of inclusion, that we don't forget each other, right? Just because you get sick and can't come on a Sunday doesn't mean you're not part of our community anymore. Like we have people who say, I'm willing to spend an extra couple hours on my Sunday to go out and make sure they're included too. And then all the people who say, I'm going to volunteer my time to teach a young person about Jesus. And that it's like we live in such a selfish world, and then to come to a church and see all these people being unselfish with each other and giving of their time and their love, so that everybody gets to be on this journey together, it's beautiful. And it's one reason to believe. I know I'm talking a lot. I got one more other story I want to tell. My last congregation, we always had senior Sunday when the seniors who had graduated.
I thought you meant old people Sunday.
We should have that. I don't think we could call it Old People Sunday. I don't know if anybody would come, but
I would.
we had so we have Senior Sunday. We recognize the graduates. They tell us, where they're going, what their plans are for next year, and we know for a lot of them we might not ever see them again. They'll go off to college, and then they'll get jobs, and they'll move to different cities and all that. But there was one young man who was going to speak, and I knew that he didn't believe in God. And I'm like, as a pastor, do I want to give this kid the microphone? And maybe I shouldn't say he didn't believe in God. He was unsure. He was definitely agnostic, questioning, wasn't sure about this thing. As a lot of young adults go through that, and that's normal. And so I gave him the mic, and he stood in front of the whole congregation, and he said, so I remembered exactly how he said it. He said, I'm not sure what I believe about God, but I absolutely believe in this community. And I was just like in tears, and I think that's a reason to believe, right? A reason to believe in God is the community that God creates, and the gift of community that is able to hold somebody when they don't believe, or when they have questions and doubts, right? That I don't know where he is now or where his faith is, but I'm so glad he grew up in a community and has that touchstone in his life that I think will be an invitation to faith throughout his life.
Yeah, I work with a lot of young people, and a lot of them are Christmas and Easter folks, and I don't ever want to dis that, because on a Christmas Eve service, that could be your moment to connect with God. And I think that's also the beauty of community, is to give words to the encounter of God, because I just don't think that anyone is gonna come to faith unless they've actually encountered God. But how do you know if you've encountered God? Unless you're talking to fellow Christian believers who are saying, oh yeah, that was absolutely a God moment. Like that was an answered prayer, or that was, God working in your world, in putting the plan in motion, or like giving those words. And I think to a skeptic, they're like, no, it was just coincidence. It was just luck. It was just whatever it might be. But then to be in community with other people is to name God working in the world.
And that's the whole point of mentors, right? Of people who've been down the path before you. And Christianity is not just the people in the present, but it's people throughout history who have had encounters with God, describe them. And so when you have an experience and you're like, what is this? Then there's people who say, oh, that's God, and let me show you why. For me, just a couple of years ago, I was kind of having that dark night of the soul experience where I wasn't feeling God's
I was just
presence.
thinking the same thing. I was like, I didn't know what a dark night of the soul was until someone read it to me, and I was like, that's what I'm doing.
Right. I don't feel God. I don't feel as alive or energized in my faith as I used to. And am I falling out of faith? Am I doubting? Am I not believing? And I was reading St. John of the Cross, and him describing the Christian journey, and he describes those dark nights of the soul, that time of unknowing, that time of letting go of past things that gave you comfort, as actually you're not going backwards, you're actually going forward. That's part of the journey of the Christian faith. And without someone who'd been there, and he could describe it in ways like, that's it. I'm experiencing exactly that right now. And, he was writing in Spain hundreds of years ago, right?
Yeah.
But the gift of Christianity, and that's, again, the institution of Christianity and this history of people who have walked this relationship with God, sharing it forward, then when we have these encounters or the experiences in our own life, we can say, oh, this is part of it. This is God too. And we can be encouraged rather than, walk away because we're trying to do it ourselves and no one's talking to us or giving us their experience.
Right. I feel like we've been talking a lot about people that aren't in our churches. So I want to like pivot to like, if you're listening to this and you're actively in a church, like I hope you're hearing that like we need you out in the world. We need you out being a mentor in the world, inviting people to church, because you might be the person that helps put names and labels and God moments into somebody's life.
Yeah, and be curious.
Yeah.
Like when people are telling you, like you're doing with young adults or college students, and they're, telling you they're spiritual but not religious. It'd be easy to be like, well, you should change, and
Right,
start
yeah.
coming to church.
I don't do that.
That will not be helpful, right? But like, tell me more. Tell me about what that experience is like. Tell me about your encounters with something
And
transcendent
be like, I
beyond
have had
you.
a similar encounter
Right.
like that, and I named that as a moment where God came to me and spoke to me.
Right, because we're all humans, and there's one God, in my belief, and I think we all encounter that God in pretty similar ways.
Yeah.
That if we just share those experiences, we'll start finding lots of commonality,
Right.
and then from there, we can say what's been helpful to you, and
Right.
we can go beyond.
Right. And I do think there's more open moments than you imagine. Like there's so much suffering that happens in the world that like those are almost always opening moments to just be Christian to them. You don't have to evangelize to them as they're going through a tragedy or suffering something, but to just say, I have hope. And if they say, how could you possibly have hope right now? I believe that God has a plan. I believe in a God that loves me, and that God of love is going to win. It might
Yeah.
be super simple, but then just being kind to them, listening to them, a friend to them, a Christian to them, that doesn't just see them as, oh yeah, well, you're just another person that went through that tragedy.
Well, and I think part of being a Christian is we're not afraid of the dark.
No, we are not.
Right? Because we have a God who went to the cross, and he's our leader. And so we're willing to go to dark places. And so, you have someone who's suffering where maybe someone who doesn't have that faith is afraid of that, so they keep their distance, or they're not willing to go with you. But
Death is terrifying, and
Right.
eternal life is
right.
terrifying.
And that's not that only Christians do this, but I think
Right.
part of what Christians do, because of our faith and our understanding of who Jesus is and God entering dark places and vulnerable places, is that when we see suffering, we take steps towards it, not away from it, in lots of different ways. And that could be the suffering of homelessness or hunger or abuse or sickness or cancer or death. We are people who are compelled to be with people in those moments because we have a God who is with us in those moments. We've experienced it ourselves. And I think that's another reason to believe, in my mind, is that we have a God who compels his people to help those who are suffering.
I would say too that sometimes, well, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, sometimes I am afraid of the dark. Sometimes I am afraid to go in those dark places with somebody because I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to invite
yeah.
pain. However, the God who loves me is in that dark place with them, and for that reason I want to be in that dark place, even if I am afraid. And I would like to say real quick that being part of the church does not mean you won't get hurt.
Oh,
You will absolutely get hurt.
Yes.
But hopefully the goal is together that we also can experience the beauty of reconciliation. Because we're going to be hurt in the world, right? Pastor Travis, like you said earlier, tragedy is going to come, pain is going to come. Do we want to be part of a community that even when the community itself hurts us, we work toward the beauty of reconciliation? And we have a reason to do that. The love of God compels us to do that, even when it's hard.
Right, like the teaching of forgiveness is embedded in our faith. And so that teaching recognizes that people will sin against you, right? But where else do you learn what to do with that when someone sins against you? So much of what I hear in the world is you just write them off, you ghost them. I don't need to have that in my life. I will just protect myself, and they were not in my life anymore. And then you keep doing that, and pretty soon you're just by yourself.
Right.
But Christianity invites a process of truth-telling, of confession, of repentance, admitting your own fault, and offering forgiveness, receiving forgiveness, and finding a way back together. Right. And I think that's when a community And we're always learning how to do that
Right.
together. Nobody's perfect, but it is something we are aiming for, right? It's one of the goals of our community, of our Christian community, is that forgiveness and reconciliation. And that's, I mean, there's so many beautiful things about the Christian faith that Jesus taught that when we live it out is breathtakingly beautiful and compelling.
Belief is worth the risk.
Amen to that.
Thanks for joining us this season. Tune in for next week.